Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 45 to 53. Human efforts on Sirat al-Mustaqim bear results. That if we continue on this path, then these are bound to give us the results at some point in time in the future. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any query or question regarding this presentation. Recap verses 38 to 44. I have not gone through all the verses which we have covered previously because there was a suggestion from a member that maybe we only go through the previous presentations, and in that way we can cover them in more detail. The Quran is not a product of the human intellect, hence what is given in it in relation to the system of deen cannot be thought and put together by the human mind. Therefore, no human being can produce anything like the Quran, which encompasses every aspect of the human self and its further development. This point is important for us who are the students of the Quran and, of course, of the system of deen, that we should convince ourselves and ask a question. Whenever we go through various verses and their interpretations, we should look at it and say, can a human mind think like that? And we will come to this conclusion that human beings cannot think about it at their own. Particularly, even if the ideas come to their mind, but with the precision which is given in the Quran as a law or a value, we cannot be so sure about it. There are three ways to approach the Quran: higher knowledge to encompass its realities, establish it as a practical system and experience the benefits, and look at the evidence of the rise and fall of previous nations, and note the relative values which they followed and which led to their destruction. Next point is the Quran demands our full focus and attention to understand it and accept its value system in order to benefit from it. Half-hearted attempts do not bring about a change in the human self, hence those people who do not employ their full force of perception cannot benefit from its guidance. This is an important point for us as students of the Quran, that whatever we are doing, for example, the way we are living in this man-made world, we have to earn a living. So without going into what we are doing physically to earn a living, cognitively, at a thinking level, intellectual level, we should go through the Quran as a system of deen. And it should not put us off that what is going on around us, whether this system is practically possible or not. That is not an issue at this point. The issue is that we should understand the system of deen, number one. Number two, our own thinking should change. We should develop ourselves and start thinking on these lines that this is a possibility sometimes in the future. Allah does not do injustice to human beings. It is human beings themselves who do injustice to themselves in this world, and as a consequence live in a state of perpetual fear and grief. And that is an important point, that are we willing to stay in this state of fear and huzn, or there is an alternative to that? Can we get rid of it? Can we think of the system of deen in which there will be no fear and huzn, and how that will be addressed? Only the guidance of the Quran can relieve them from this state of fear and grief. Now let us go to the first verse of this presentation. Following the wrong path of life is very deceptive. وَيَوْمَ يَحْشُرُهُمْ كَأَن لَّمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا سَاعَةً مِّنَ النَّهَارِ يَتَعَارَفُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ قَدْ خَسِرَ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِلِقَاءِ اللَّهِ وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ. When Allah will gather them together in the battlefield so that they can witness the outcome of their wrong path, at that time they will realize that this whole time in which they remained intoxicated by their wealth and power was only like one moment in a day. At that time, the confronting forces will recognize each other, and the people who do not acknowledge this fact today, that they will ever have to face the law of Allah, at that time they will be in severe loss because they did not adopt the correct path. This could also be in the life of the hereafter, but here this meaning is preferred. The meaning of hashar, because the word hashar is used there, I thought go through its root. To gather people and drive them towards the same direction. So it is in the meanings of gathering and then driving those to in a certain direction. And this driving could be voluntary, that is, they themselves are moving in that direction, or somebody else is directing them. Ibn Faris says that its basic meaning is to gather, to raise up, get up, and go. People use it for crowding and to create restrictions for each other, i.e., such a gathering which is for creating difficulty and hardship for others. And this is as per Muhit. I've noted here some applications because Lugat has more detail, so we can have a look in Lugat al-Quran. In the Quran, it is used in the meaning of gathering for war, used in relation to being forced out of their homes to be gathered for accountability, can mean war or displacement. And this is important because a lot of conflicts and wars are going on in the world, and we can witness this gathering. Sending out officials to gather people at some place, and this was done by Pharaoh, and the term used over there is hashirin, to be subjugated and then gathered in relation to Jahannam. Al-Hashar is also used in the sharpening of a blade. Also used in gathering and taking from one location to another location. For example, during famine, people migrate. As I said, it could be voluntary movement of people because of certain circumstances in a particular area. Death is also called al-hashar in relation to raising up for accountability. For all other meanings, see Lughat al-Quran, it is applicable to this life as well as the life of the hereafter. Overall context to be kept in view. In any case, when we are reading the Quran, we know it, that this life, Quran presents to us as a continuation into the hereafter. The only difference is that over here, we human beings are fully responsible for whatever we do in this world. And the reference, another reference I've noted over here is the life in the hereafter, that is the book Jahan-e-Farda, What Does the Quran Say? And pages 154 to 157. And this is the English version. Further reflections on this verse. First is, what is noted in this verse can be related to this life or the next life. The meaning expressed here is with respect to this world, because the Quran is very much about this world, as the life depends on what we do here. Second is, we observe that in the world, evil forces do come together and strive for their evil purposes. And we can see plenty of it in today's world, as they understand that in this unity of theirs lies the achievement of their aims of life. The state expressed in this verse seems to be the one where they are closer to meeting their fate through the hands of Jamaat-e-Mominin, who are pursuing al-Haqq. We witness this phenomenon in our world today, where though there is no Jamaat-e-Mominin, the tussle continues between one set of forces against another one. And Quran has referred to such confrontations as well, where even if there is no Jamaat-e-Mominin, there is always some tussle going on between one set of forces with certain values against another set of forces with their own relative values. An interesting point mentioned here is regarding time. The Quran states that when events arrive at such a point, the past seems like a moment in time, i.e., duration in years appears to be only one moment. All past events are viewed by the human self as if they all happened yesterday. And it's quite interesting that if we look back at our own life, whatever age we have, it will look like a moment in time, whereas we will remember our events even if we do not refer to the time at which those events took place. So time virtually disappears, and we remember our events more than the time at which these occurred. Next is, in a man-made world, the absence of Quranic guidance is glaringly visible. By stating towards the end of the verse, "Bi-liqa'i-llahi," when we meet the consequences of our deeds, that is good or bad, as a consequence of the law of requital, the Quran terms this as meeting with Allah. Allah with all His attributes may mean that we figure out ourselves which attributes of His are applicable here. For example, any chance of protection, further growth, sphere retribution for the kind of deed committed, display of power, etc. This needs further reflection by us. So there is a lot of reflection required on this, bi-liqa'i-llah, that since we have come to the Quran, we should try to figure out that where we are, for example, in 2023, which divine attributes will be applicable to our life at this point in time. In conclusion, the Quran has summed it up by stating, وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ, because they were not interested in Allah's guidance. And if someone is not interested in Allah's guidance, there is no possibility, of course, of getting guidance. But the consequences of law of mukafat will be there. If one is not interested in advice, suggestion, direction, etc., even in our man-made word from someone, and then we leave him alone, what reaction do we expect from him? What I've said over here is that if we come across people to whom, when we mention pure Quran, they don't like it or they keep quiet, and it is a point of instruction for us that we should note what kind of a reaction we get, and then we move on and do not waste our time, not get bogged down by that, not become discouraged by that. In the case of the Quran, we know it will definitely lead to ruin in the hereafter, as the human self will not meet the criteria of the hereafter. If all such selves come together here under Batil, ultimately these will get defeated by Haqq. And this has a very strong connotation for our Eimaan, that despite the fact that present world is overwhelmingly based on Batil system, still we are clear about Al-Haqq, which is given in the Quran. And since Al-Haqq is the one which is supported by Allah, so our Eimaan should be in this aspect that it will take place. Our only job is to remain united and keep pursuing this path. Next verse 1046, another important reality explained. وَإِمَّا نُرِيَنَّكَ بَعْضَ الَّذِي نَعِدُهُمْ أَوْ نَتَوَفَّيَنَّكَ فَعَلَيْنَا مَرْجِعُهُمْ ثُمَّ اللَّهُ شَهِيدٌ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ. O Rasool, in your heart this thought will emerge that when this decisive moment arrives between the two confronting parties, then it is possible that the destructions about which we are warning them, some of them may appear during your lifetime, and it is also possible that your time may be up before their emergence. This is because it is connected to our law of requital and the law of respite. It is not connected to someone's age. But have this assurance that sooner or later, all of them will certainly have to return in front of our law of requital. That law which is keeping every deed of theirs in its sight, they cannot save themselves from it. Now, the way I have treated this verse is that we all get at times maybe impatient that why can't we get results during our own lifetime? But over here, Quran has pointed our attention to something very serious. It says that when you ask this question, then you are not fully coming to grips with the nature of human self and its life. Because if we are living at the level of human self, then this question should not even arise in our head. And of course, we gradually and slowly move towards this understanding. So over here, Quran is really educating and training us about a very important aspect of our living in this world. Why do we expect results of all of our efforts in this physical world? And this is the important psychological issue behind that we should ask ourselves a question: why do we expect results of all of our efforts in this physical world? Are we not sure about the life of the hereafter? And that's the question. Here the Quran has responded to an important thought arising in the human mind and giving a satisfying evidence-based description. However, this requires further cognitive analysis by us using the force of our Eimaan and the context of Deen. The way in which our cognitive makeup functions in our daily life, the Quran points to this directly. Everything we do in this life depends on our overall view and direction of life. If we are convinced of the end of our life with death, we would like the outcome of our efforts to appear as quickly as possible so that we can enjoy these before we die and disappear. This is the default state of human beings of all denominations without the pure Quranic guidance. And that is the point on which we should concentrate, that when we get these kind of thoughts in our mind, are we fully convinced of the life of the hereafter? Are we totally convinced of this, that our self has developed to that level of understanding where it should stop asking these questions. So these questions at a basic level do arise in our mind, but we have to counter them through our own conviction. After acquiring Quranic guidance, we obtain a different view of our existence, which after a while allows us to look into the possibility of life in the hereafter. Initially, this journey may be solo, but ultimately we join those others who are also on this path. The natural consequence of Quranic guidance. This is where we learn wider aspects of the struggle for the system of deen. So important is to stay together and keep pursuing it and not giving up. Because if we start giving up and we start taking our own path in life and go over somewhere else, which is not purely Quranic, then essentially we are giving up Sirat-e-Mustaqim. And that is an important thing, because Quran is saying that initially results may not appear to you, but as your self will develop, you will see that the things have started to fall in place. How the Quran helps to change our outlook. Why do we wish to strive for deen? Because we are not satisfied with man-devised systems and their gross injustices. However, we witness the deeply entrenched system of batil around us and look at all the options via which we can possibly get the route to success for deen. We think hard and then come to this conclusion that there is no possibility at this stage that deen can even be a remote possibility. And that is where, if we come to this conclusion that deen is not a possibility, then essentially we are giving up. Here our Eimaan and conviction gets tested severely. And this is the point, if we overcome that, then our Eimaan grows and multiplies. And that is an important point, which not only that we should understand, but all those who are coming towards the Quran, we should caution them, warn them, and tell them that this stage will come in your life. Here, many of those who had excitedly joined the ranks gradually leave to find new directions, as they are not willing to pursue something whose physical possibility is virtually nil in their view. And I come across this kind of thinking. And this is a very dangerous thinking, because this is how our deeds go wasted, as noted in Surah Kahf, that if we give up this path and think that there are shortcuts to that, or we are not looking for the system of deen and we are just looking for our own emancipation and salvation, then essentially we are not following the Quran. However, those who are fully convinced of the Quranic path become even more convinced, and their Eimaan gains strength with every passing day. Because over here, we are not dealing with the Pharaoh of the world. Through the Quran, we are actually dealing with Allah. And Allah owns everything. And He has created this universe not as batil, but as al-Haqq. And this conviction has to come from the depths of our own heart. Nobody can give us that. Nobody can convince me, for example, of this path. So this is an important thing, that all of us who are students of the Quran to concentrate on this aspect, that how can I come to grips with the realities expressed in the Quran and what exactly al-Haqq is. Because if al-Haqq is weak and is not going to overcome batil, then whole of this creation is meaningless. They use the signs given in the Quran to light up their direction and know that since human life does not end with death, whether the results for deen materialize during their finite existence or not, it is a non-issue. So we should stop looking for results in this life, but keep making effort. We should expect that at some stage these will materialize, may not be in our own lifetime. They collectively analyze the issue rationally using the Quran and the evidence gathered so far that, firstly, that they are looking for guidance and they did get it. And we know it. Since we have come to the Quran, we were looking for guidance and we have found the guidance and we have checked it rationally. So there is no question of forsaking it. First wish is fulfilled. That is of ours, those who are on this path. They were not happy with the unjust word created by the human intellect, and the world around has even become worse. A sign that the law of requital is working. At least we know in today's world that the law of requital is working continuously, and people's results are coming before them. They wish to be with those who have the same goal, and they joined them. And that is the second wish is fulfilled. Next slide, more finer reflections. They got together and started to figure out the finer details of Sirat Mustaqim and managed to remove their differences as noted in verse 3103. Third wish fulfilled by coming together and the removal of differences. I put down these points after carefully thinking through it, that removal of differences means that we are all heading towards one goal, one objective, one aim. And we know that this is the path which Allah says that you are following Allah. That is, Allah becomes our model. And this aspect will become even further clarified once we go to the next presentation. Now they need to acquire that Quranic psyche, which is precisely required for the system of deen. This requires detailed analysis of the Quranic verses and their continuous application in their dealings in life with others, until, just like the function of breathing, it becomes an integral part of their selves. This serves as a solid sign and is achievable. Because this is a slow path, but it is the path on which our self keeps becoming strengthened as we go along it, and this Quranic understanding gets into our subconscious. They continue on this path and use the instruction of Allah, Amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. That is, they have Eimaan, they do salih deeds. We have gone through this aspect previously as well. This is a recipe for success. And what they do is, as a consequence of that, they keep providing strength to each other, and they say, remain steadfast, remain patient on this path. Results will materialize at some point in the future. Never doubting in the promise of Allah that this striving of theirs is bound to culminate in success as they are following the formula. Here in this verse, Allah has reiterated his promise as well as pointed to this fact that he, that is his law, is a witness on all that is going on in the human world. As noted in verse 1340, our job is to continue to learn and pass on the message to others within the means available to us. Similar wording is used in this verse of Surah Ra'd, فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ. So this is slightly different from the verse under review. Our responsibility is clearly outlined here. We pass on the message, and Allah's law takes account of what human beings do. The path of the developed self is one continuous, unbreakable whole. There is another interesting point implicit here for us, that if we have developed full conviction in the life of the hereafter as part of the process of acquiring Eimaan, then why should we be concerned with getting results ahead of the completion of the accountability process set in place by Allah? In fact, the Quran makes our life easier. It only gives us those responsibilities at a particular point in time which are directly proportional to the developed state of ourself. So we shouldn't go ahead of that, because Quran will open up its folds to us, its guidance to us when the next stage will come. This is where the test of our Eimaan comes into play, i.e. not to get frustrated and distracted. Any frustration and distraction means that we should take care of it and not to give in, and go back to the Quran again and again to understand that, am I missing something? Am I overlooking something? And then discuss with others as well who are on this path with us. We know Allah is very firm about his laws, and he lets his law of requital do the job, and those who follow the wrong path will meet the consequences of their deeds at some future point in time. And the same goes for us, that we will meet up with the outcomes of our salih deeds. Then why should we be eager to reap their outcomes earlier than the law allows? And this is important to keep in mind, that whatever salih deeds we are doing together, individually as well as doing together, their results are already happening, are already taking place. These are being manifested. If those are not visible, doesn't mean that it's not taking place. These are already leaving their impact on ourselves as well as in the outer world. We have the assurance of the hereafter due to our being on Sirat Mustaqim, and we know we are doing our best within the means available to us in a man-device system. Should we become desperate and resort to frustrated talk in order to become distracted and start doing those acts which are not in line with the Quran? Now let us go to the next two verses. Every nation is warned before their destruction. وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولٌ فَإِذَا جَاءَ رَسُولُهُمْ قُضِيَ بَيْنَهُم بِالْقِسْطِ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ وَيَقُولُونَ مَتَىٰ هَٰذَا الْوَعْدُ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. This pattern of our law of requital has been in place from the beginning, that our messenger arrives to every nation, and on his arrival all matters are decided based on justice and fairness, and no injustice of any kind is done to them. These people themselves inquire from you that if you are truthful in your statements, then tell us about that destruction with which you keep threatening us. When will it arrive? And this is a very interesting part of human psychology. And let us look at these two verses in more detail, expanding the issue of giving warning. Warning as a permanent value needs our careful attention, as it helps in comprehending a few points related to the functioning of the law of requital. Firstly, no nation is destroyed until an adequate warning has come to them and they have the requisite ability to comprehend it. In fact, we are seeing around in the world in which we are living that not only these nations have been warned once, but I think they have been warned more than they require to be warned. And that is the feeling we have, that they have been given too much time and they have done a colossal amount of damage to humanity. Secondly, there are people among them who realize the importance of promoting good and forbidding evil and raise their voices against the wrong system. Some suffer for this as well, like Julian Assange or Sharif. Thirdly, when a nation goes down, there exists a potential for good people to emerge and take charge. Regarding the warning, the comment I have made is probably more related to human time scale, but we should try to understand that the divine time scale, that is Quranic time scale, is a bit longer, because Allah has access to the thought process of every human being in this world or in the universe. So that law has to take its own course. Obviously, if the results haven't come out, that means we have a more time of respite for us, that is those who are in Sirat al-Mustaqim, that they should develop themselves more firmly and have better understanding of the Quran, so that if the system of deen, the possibility of the emergence of the system of deen takes place at some point in the future, then we should be ready for that. Tulu Islam also serves the role of a warner across the world through its members, books, videos, lectures, meetings, one-to-one exchange of views, etc. This is related to the aspect of communicating the guidance and the admonishment of the pure Quran across the world. Though others are warning as well, but they are not warning within the context of the system of deen. Whereas we are, as an organization, as a platform, are letting people know that being warned of the consequences in the physical world is, of course, good. But in fact, we should look at the purpose of life and the system of deen and say that even if you replace this bad system with another system which is less bad than that, even then you haven't acquired the aim of life. You will not get a world which is free from fear and huzn. Previously, Allah sent the messengers. However, with the arrival of the Quran, this process of Anbiya has ended. This is now the responsibility of those who understand the need for the system of deen based on the pure Quran. So warning previously was done through the messengers of Allah, and of course, then people passed it on to others. And today, human beings are the ones who have to carry out this function, and they do carry out this function. Second is under the cause and effect. We already know that if we have done something wrong, then its results will come out. There are studies done over in every country, and particularly in the West, where they link, for example, crime towards deprivation and poverty in particular areas. It's not that these people do not know. They are following this path deliberately. Warning is part of being alive. Here we need to recognize an important part, that if warning quickens the pace of the law of requital and is a prerequisite, then we need to enhance our efforts to warn people at the top as frequently as possible. For example, by sending letters, emails, books, getting access, if possible, to them. For example, among us, if there are influential people, they should seek audience with these people in power and speak to them. Not with a view to convincing them, but just like Musa, who warned Pharaoh. And if we look at verse Taha, And this whole thing is explained over there. For example, Allah has asked him, Azhaba ila Firauna innahu taga, that you go to Pharaoh and tell him that you have exceeded all the limits, and then it and has transgressed all bounds. Speak to him mildly, he may reflect and fear the consequences of this path. And it's important that when we speak to the people, we tell them rationally and explain to them mildly that the path they are pursuing is the wrong one and its consequences will be bad. Here we should note an important point, that if the warner is someone who is not Quranic, then he is essentially giving warning within the non-deen system, which means replacing the existing system with some improvements, which are essentially a continuation of the same system. For example, they satisfy themselves by stating that more poor people have now gone above the poverty line. Next is keep reminding ourselves that Quran is liyunzira man kana hayyan, warning for those who are alive, or we can say a warning for the benefit of those who have a desire to live. So Quran itself says that it is a warning for those who wish to seek guidance, who wish to follow its path, and then they benefit from it. So this tanzir is not something which we should take it negatively, that why Quran is warning us. This warning is for our own benefits, because it reminds us the purpose of our life. Warning is part of administering justice. By stating here, Quziya bainahum bil qiste, the Quran has reiterated the importance of doing justice in the world. If we have a system in which we do not warn people about the law of requital and the laws in a land, and then hold them accountable if they go against them when they're not even aware of them, it will be a gross injustice. We hear the phrase, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. The Quran has made it clear as a value that under the system of deen, we must make sure that all permanent values and their sub-clauses are known across the land. Provide education, training, and knowledge of their rational background so that people see their benefits for their own selves. And we know that even in today's world, with all the means of communications, some laws are passed and public may not know about them. And then the level of understanding of public would be pretty low, where they may not understand the laws. And in many cases, these laws are framed in such a language which only lawyers can understand, common people cannot understand. The Quran says that make it simple, direct, and people should understand the laws and also understand the benefits they are going to get from these sub-clauses. Of course, Quran has already laid down all the permanent values. We are there. We should carry out, we should make certain sub-clauses under it to make them practical in our own world, in our own system. Similarly, the laws cannot be brought into effect retrospectively. These become applicable from the day everyone understands these laws. Adequate warning, including a consultation period, should be carried out before introducing any subclass. If we go back to Surah Yusuf and remember what Hazrat Yusuf told his brothers, La tasriba alaykumul yawma, that today you are not accountable for what you have done in the past because you are not adequately warned about it. And now is the time that now onwards, if you make same mistakes, then of course you will be punished. So these are the things to which Quran invites our attention, because Quran is essentially for reformation, for giving time to human beings, understanding and recognizing that this is the only life they have in which they can do something for the hereafter. If the public considers the laws to be punitive, to control them, and to restrict their freedom, then their hearts and minds will not accept the spirit of the law. So law must be understood right in finest details, that it is for the benefit of people themselves. These are not something which is imposed on them. And in any case, Quran has provided the guidance by saying, La ikraha fid deen. Hence, it is a failure from the start. Any feeling of injustice from any value or law is injustice in itself. The message is repeated here regarding the functioning of the law of requital and the law of respite. For us, the point to explore is that something which is so obvious to us, why is it not obvious to others? What is in the human psyche which prevents human intellect from considering the possibility of being held accountable? Next is, here we can differentiate the two psyches, that is ours vis-a-vis others. are theirs. We know clearly about the path we pursue to reach this state of the self's understanding, and by analyzing it in reverse, we can figure out their outlook towards the seriousness of their own life. Instead of seriously looking at the admonishment of the Quran, they have reached such a state of degradation that they respond by saying, "When will the promised punishment arrive?" As if this punishment is going to be a blessing for them. The interesting point here is that they do not bring their own impending physical death into their calculation. And this is very interesting, that when people say, okay, bring on this punishment, they are forgetting that they are going to die in any case at some point in time. And what's the point of confronting these things? Rather, they should look into it rationally, that what is good in it for us, or just keep quiet. They are going to die as all of us, and then what if there is another life? Let us go to the next verse, 1049. Laws exist in every part of the universe. Human intellect needs to become aware of these laws. I will not go through this verse and go through the meanings. Say to them that bringing this destruction is not within my control. It will occur according to the law of requital of Allah. My own state is such that I do not have any control over my own benefit or loss. This also occurs according to the law of Mashiach of Allah. However, I know this much, that according to this law, there is a defined respite for the manifestations of the outcomes of the deeds of every nation. When that time arrives, then it is neither delayed by a moment, nor can it be moved forward. Conviction in laws leads to a strengthened self. From the lips of the messenger, the Quran declares that benefit and loss in physical life is connected to the functioning of the law of requital. Being human, the messenger does not know the outcome of the conduct of those people who oppose this message. However, it is certain that the results will appear at the appropriate moment, as stated by Illa Mashallah. This phrase means definitely according to the law of Allah. By noting likulli ummatin ajalun, the Quran has made it clear that for every nation there is a time of respite, that is ajalun, which is set according to their conduct and behavior. As noted in verse 1338, likulli ajalin kitabun, for every ajal or respite there is a law. And we have gone over this verse previously under Surah Rad. Then it is made clear for us that once this period of respite comes to an end, then it cannot be delayed, just as it could not have been brought about earlier. Everything follows laws, so there is no point in asking the messenger to hasten it as if something good is being expected. And it goes for us as well, that our psychology should be such that we should not ask for these things to be hastened or delayed, because everything is following laws. And any thought which arises in our heart regarding this, we should try to overcome it in the light of the Quranic guidance. People who become arrogant through intoxication of power take the Quranic warning as a jest, like a patient who is sick asking the doctor that why can this death not be quickened, rather than looking for a treatment to cure himself. Having acquired Quranic guidance, we see clearly the wrong path being followed by those who reject its guidance or do not seem to be seriously interested. Obviously, they do not reflect seriously on the Quranic warning of following the wrong path. The Quran helps to detect weaknesses of man-made systems. From the point of view of getting benefit and not suffering loss, we witness this aspect in the gambling system established by the capitalist system. Those who have inside information can benefit by this advanced knowledge, for example, of stock prices, currency manipulation, raising of prices in budgets. Those who do not have this knowledge suffer, and their fortunes decline so steeply that they go bankrupt. This is the state of whole countries which are under debt. And this happens where people function outside the Quranic value system and create their own system, because all human systems are biased because of human desires and emotions. The Quran has stated that the human self is beyond the fluctuations of human control, and this benefit and loss is in direct proportion to Eimaan and Saleh deeds. The remainder only live a physical life in this world. Here there is guidance for us to create the system of Deen, which is totally free from these evil fluctuations which are in place deliberately to rob others of their hard work. something for us to think about with such issues in the future. So under the system of Deen, such practices will be impossible. These will be eliminated. For the time of respite, we will require to work out the sub-clauses in the system, for example, time period to rectify some errors, education and training, and repeat offenders, etc. Now let us look at the next two verses, 50 and 51. Life is about managing risks, cost-benefit analysis. I'll not go through these verses, just go through the meanings. Say to them that leave this aside, that when will the time of your destruction arrive? You tell me that if this punishment arrives during the night time, or you are rounded up during the day, then what is the state of your protection against it? When the situation is this, that they do not have any way to save themselves, then what is it because of which these criminals are trying to hasten it? Have they thought of some plan to protect themselves from it, which may go to waste later? Or are you waiting for this, that when that destruction appears before you, then after witnessing it, you will accept Eimaan? But accepting Eimaan at that time will be of no use. At that time, you will only be told that this is that very destruction regarding which you used to ask to be hastened. At that time, by acceptance of Eimaan by you, that destruction will not become averted. This is because when the time for the manifestation of the outcomes of deeds arrives, then those outcomes do not go back. Further reflections on these two verses: compare it to a patient who is warned all along about chain smoking but ignores these warnings and then is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Now he becomes desperate to prolong his life on the planet. Here the question also comes to mind that if all of us are going to die and our path of life is wrong, then are we going to put it right if we get more time added on to our physical existence? And this is something which is very important for us to look around us and watch people who are about to leave this world. The Quran makes it clear that if the path of our life is wrong, then it makes no difference to Allah whether we leave here early or later. This is because we have not bothered to use our intellect and reasoning to make the right choices in life and thought that this life is only sport and entertainment. And Quran has used this word lab and lahab in a number of verses. This issue becomes a point of instruction for us as students of the Quran in order to come to grips with the human psyche behind this kind of outlook. It might look a bit fearful and scary as well, and we might not pass it on to others, but it is a fact of life. Death is a fact of life. And all of us who are here will leave this world at some point in time. So we should look at the realities of the Quran, the way these are explained, how to get maximum out of these. The Quran here instructs us to not have this kind of mentality where we delay things or ignore them, thinking that there is plenty of time to come to the guidance of Allah, or even if we do come towards it, we are not fully committed to it. This half-hearted commitment, in fact, slows us down in getting the best from the physical existence. And we live a life which is full of zan, and we have gone through it previously, i.e. doubts, uncertainty, suspicion, conjecture, speculations. All these fall under zan. As a consequence, we are unable to communicate the Quranic guidance to others properly and logically. Because if I am not fully convinced of the benefits of the Quran in relation to the system of Deen and solving human problems, then I'm never going to open my mouth and let others know. I will just keep living my life without bothering to pass it on to others, because there is no inner conviction. The Quran helps to expand our consciousness. There are a few points of interest implied here to which the Quran has drawn our attention in terms of selecting people for education and training. Since we have come to the Quran, we need to observe others to whom we pass on the message of the Quran and its appeal towards the system of Deen. This is an intrinsic part of our self-development. Next point is, we live in a world where the man-device systems have played havoc across the world. We need to observe and note the kind of mentality those people have who control affairs and those who unquestioningly follow them. Why do they do this? Why do people not resort to forbidding evil and promoting good, even according to their own standards? Death across the globe is a fact of life. And if the people of today are going to live for 100 years, say, then 1% people will die every year. I just thought that out of instruction, this figure can be Very, very interesting. This figure is staggering for a world of, say, 7.5 billion, i.e., at least 75 million people die every year. Despite this figure, death is not taken seriously. Why not? Even those who claim to have come to the Quran are afraid to mention it, whereas the Quran repeatedly reminds us about accountability and about the life of the hereafter, warns about it, and also gives glad tidings, depending upon the path selected by us. Last two verses for this presentation: immutability of Allah's laws is absolute. That is verse 52 and 53. And I'll go through the meanings. At that time, these people who used to resort to injustice and unfairness will be told that now taste the consequence of this enduring punishment. All this is because of the consequences of your own deeds. And the Quran says in the verse 1052, Tujzauna illa bima kuntum taksibun. These people inquire from you repeatedly that, is this really true? Say to them, yes, my Allah is a witness on this, that it is absolutely true. This will take place. You cannot make the law of Allah helpless so that what is going to occur according to it may not take place. And over here, Quran has very clearly said, Wama antum bimujizin, that you cannot make Allah helpless, or Allah will carry on His laws and implement them. And we can see them working in the world. Verses related to those who reject the Quranic guidance should strengthen Eimaan. In the first verse, the Quran, after stating the fact that by following the wrong path, the wrong outcomes of deeds have finally caught up, or that people have joined with the consequences of their deeds. The question is posed to these people that could you be recompensed for your deeds except for what you have done? Justice demands that people should be recompensed for what they do, and this is the basis for the creation of human beings in the world, and this forms the basis of the life of the hereafter. Because in the human world, there are different values working, like might is right, and if you have power, you can get away with the wrongs you do to other people. But not in Allah's world, because law of requital, as we know, will always ensure that whatever we do, it has consequences. Here the Quran instructs us that when evil deeds catch up with people, firstly, they get a rude surprise as they are not expecting this. And these kind of terms are used on media, unintended consequences, that they did something which the consequences were not unintended. And I find them very amusing, because I know, or we know, that law of requital is working. Contrary to that, we expect glad tidings by following the Quran. And when they say unintended consequences, obviously they never thought about the consequences of what they are doing. So they were doing it deliberately, thinking then they will get away with it. Secondly, they see the results in accumulated form, whereas we look forward to pleasant outcomes plus more. So in our case, things are different, because we are doing good on Sirat al-Mustaqim, and to the best of our ability, we are working towards the system of Deen. So that means under the law of requital, we should expect something good meeting us in the future. Thirdly, there is no time of respite left, whereas we have no issue of time, because we are working on a life of eternity, which is assured to us at a self's level. And that does not mean that we slow down and get distracted. That only means that we should reassure ourselves, and we should keep reassuring ourselves that our efforts will bear fruit at some point in time on this path of Allah. For those who do not take their life seriously, there is total disaster and waste of the whole life and nothing in the hereafter. In their present state, they are not convinced, of course, and inquire that what is being told is true or not. Because this suspicion, this doubt, this not being sure is the one which destroys human self. Such thoughts arise because we do not wish to give up our wrong path and its short-term pleasures. The Quran emphatically states that it is a fact waiting to happen. Since these laws are established by Allah, they are beyond human reach, equally applicable to the most powerful and the weakest on the planet according to their defined scales. So even if the law of requital appears to be working slow, we should never ever lose Eimaan in it, because it is working and it will show up at some point in time. And since our life does not end with death, so why should we try to hasten things which are not meant to be hastened under the law of requital? Finally, verses 10, 52, 53, issues of the human psyche. The Quran presents its message by drawing our attention to immense potentials kept within each one of us. If the system of deen had existed around us, then our task would have been easier, as books written on human psyche using the Quranic guidance would have helped us to get a higher start in our life. The books by Allama Prevails provide the fundamentals of the system of deen. Why I put down the first point is that sometimes we come across people, I wish this path is easier. The thing is that if nothing has happened or been done in the last 1,000 years, then of course the task becomes more difficult. And imagine the task of Allama Pervez, how difficult it must be for him. And at least now we know the details of the system of deen. We have to strive hard to think through the finer aspects of the human psyche towards which its verses draw our attention. For example, all that we have discovered about the constitution of our eminent self is not possible without its guidance. And this aspect will become even clearer when we go through the next presentation. How many latent potentials have we manifested which others around us are simply not aware of and so are unable to reap their benefits? For example, in the verses covered today, we have added a few points to our understanding. Firstly, the functioning of the law of requital helps us to understand the world around us. Secondly, we should never be impatient to see the outcomes of our efforts on this path quickly. The life of the moment self being eternal, we just follow the guidance of the Quran together. The results do materialize as per the law. Because our Eimaan is that Allah is Hayyul Qayyum. He is the one who is life himself and he gives life. And the Quran is, we have accepted the warning of the Quran. And as a result, according to that verse of Surah Yasin, that we have acquired that new life. Now, if we have acquired that life, then with that life, we should see the continuation of the life beyond our death. So in that way, we should never ever think of any frustration or giving up or distraction. What we should do is keep doing what we are doing together. And of course, individually as well, because at the moment, it is difficult to come together in the world because there are so many forces which are acting against the Quran. Thirdly, understand the psyche of those who do not wish to follow this path. Fourthly, Allah is supporting our efforts as long as these meet the Quranic criterion. Fifthly, there is far more hidden latent within each one of us which needs to be brought out in this life. And this is another important point which I will throw some further light in our future presentations, that already we have brought out a lot of our potentials, even through even understanding those aspects of the Quran which were hidden from us previously. And that means that we are following this path and we are making use of it. So all we need is to appreciate it, and we can compare our self-status as compared to others. It definitely has acquired higher eminence than what we had previously. And thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of deen.